What is the US's role in creating rules of engagement in space?
So what the military can do to start to clearly lay out, for example, how close is too close to get to someone else's satellite? When is that dangerous to operations? And when is it appropriate for just trying to understand what someone else is doing? And we have the opportunity now to start to define that.
Everyone, welcome aboard.
By the way that we act and by the way that we communicate our actions to allies, partners, and adversaries around the world.
Considering that this is something that the U.S. has been worried about for so long, I believe I actually read in your report, basically since Sputnik launched.
Yes.
How is it that we still don't have it?
So to set norms and to communicate them requires a level of openness. And for the longest time, for many decades, much of what the military and the intelligence community did in space was highly classified. In many cases, it was things that we could not even communicate to our closest allies. And so what's happened, adversaries have exploited that, and they've realized that this is an Achilles heel for the US military, this dependence on space, and then the inability to publicly attribute what's happening in space if an adversary does something malicious in intent.
There's been a few times that both Russia and China have talked about different treaties and about not putting weapons into space. Why do you think those weren't taken advantage of?
The Russian-Chinese joint effort to try to get a new agreement to limit the weaponization of space through the United Nations, they only ban a limited type of set of weapons in space, and that is weapons that are based in space that have effects in space or on Earth. What the treaty notably leaves out is the types of space weapons that Russia and China have focused on developing, and that is weapons that are based on Earth but are targeted at things in space. So their treaty doesn't address the most pressing weaponization problem that we have because it's not to their advantage.
How different would it be to establish guardrails from any other that we've set up before on land?
Norms of behavior, accepted patterns of operation, these are human constructs, and the way that we have developed norms in other domains can translate into space. The one thing that is different about the space domain is the way you measure things may need to be different, and in some cases could be much more complicated. So for example, in space, two objects that are near each other, distance is one factor, but it's not the only factor. You may also want to look at, okay, what is the energy required, the change in velocity required for one object to intersect the other. And that might be something that you want to create limits around. Like, don't put yourself in an orbit where a tiny change in velocity is going to put you on a collision course with this other object. We have to think through how the physics are a bit different and coming up with what are the metrics that we want to use to base our norms around.
So to make sure I understand that correctly, Space Force, the TV show, is not accurate.
That's right.
Got it.